They said a human wouldn't last 5 seconds in the viper pit. They said his bones would snap under the gravity, or his mind would shatter from the psychic pressure. But when 18-year-old Caleb Thorne walked into the most lethal all-female alien combat unit in the galaxy, he didn't flinch. He didn't cower. He didn't even check his pulse. Instead, he looked at a room full of 7-foot-tall apex predators, creatures designed by evolution to kill, and he did the one thing that terrified them more than any weapon ever could. He smiled. And that smile was hiding a secret that would bring the entire galactic government to its knees. But before we dive into how one human boy dismantled a galactic empire with nothing but a grin, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button to help this story reach more sci-fi fans, and smash that subscribe button so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Ready? Let's enter the Academy. The shuttle touched down on the landing pad of the Vanguard Imperial Academy with a heavy, mechanical hiss, venting steam into the gray, overcast sky of the planet Ironhold. This wasn't just a school, it was a fortress, a monolithic structure of black steel and hard light that pierced the clouds, designed to churn out the warlords and commanders of the next century. 4,000s of species across the Galactic Federation, this place was the pinnacle of prestige. For a human, it was supposed to be a death sentence. Caleb Thorne adjusted the strap of his duffel bag, his standard-issue gray uniform looking woefully thin against the biting wind. He wasn't supposed to be here. Humans were the diplomats of the galaxy, the traitors, the scribes. They were the soft species, the ones who filed the paperwork while the real species fought the wars. Caleb had applied for the logistics division, a safe, boring desk job where he could disappear into the background. But the datapad in his hand flashed a different assignment, one that glowed in an aggressive, blinking red. Unit Omega 9. Omega 9. The Viper Pit. It wasn't just a combat unit, it was an experimental training cadre reserved for the daughters of the galaxy's high warlords. These were the queens of the battlefield, biogenetically superior, aggressively territorial, and famously intolerant of weakness. Placing a human male in Omega 9 wasn't an administrative error, it was a cruel joke. Or a test. Caleb took a deep breath, tasting the metallic tang of the air, and stepped through the massive blast doors of the sector. The hallway was wide enough to drive a tank through, lined with trophy cases displaying the severed claws and armor of defeated enemies. The gravity here was set to 1.5 times Earth standard, making every step feel like he was wading through deep water. But Caleb didn't drag his feet. He marched. He reached the double doors of the lecture hall. Inside, the noise was deafening, a cacophony of guttural roars, psychic hums, and the clatter of hardened exoskeletons against metal desks. Caleb pushed the doors open. Silence slammed into the room like a physical blow. 50 pairs of eyes turned to him. They weren't human eyes. Some were slit-pupilled and golden, belonging to the reptilian Dracari. Others were multifaceted and cold, belonging to the insectoid Vex. There were towering, four-armed Krogans and ethereal, psionic wraiths. The sheer biological power in the room raised the temperature by 10 degrees. At the center of the room, leaning back in a chair that looked more like a throne, was Zalara. She was a siren, a species known for their hypnotic beauty and terrifying speed. Her skin was a pale, shimmering violet, and deadly, razor-thin spines were retracted along her forearms. She was the undisputed alpha of Omega 9. Zalara slowly stood up, towering over Caleb by at least a foot. The room held its breath. She sniffed the air, a look of pure disgust curling her lip. Is this a joke? Her voice was a melodic purr that vibrated in Caleb's chest. Did the janitor get lost? A ripple of laughter went through the room, harsh, barking sounds. A Vex warrior near the window chittered, "Careful, Zalara. If you breathe too hard you might break his ribs." Caleb stood his ground. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, but his face was a mask of absolute calm. He looked up at Zalara, meeting her predatory gaze dead on. And then, slowly, deliberately, the corners of his mouth twitched upward. He smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile. It wasn't an apologetic grimace. It was a warm, polite, almost bored smile. It was the kind of smile you give a toddler who is throwing a tantrum. "Actually," Caleb said, his voice steady and surprisingly deep, "I'm your new tactical analyst. But if you need the floor swept, I charge extra." The silence returned, but this time, it was heavy with confusion. They expected fear. They thrived on it. Biology dictated that prey should cower before a predator. By smiling, Caleb had just broken the fundamental law of their nature. He had signaled that he didn't see them as threats. He saw them as peers. Or worse, he saw them as beneath him. Zalara narrowed her eyes, her spines extending slightly with a sharp snick. You have a lot of confidence for a species that went extinct on 3 different planets, human. Do you know where you are? Room 404, Advanced Asymmetrical Warfare, Caleb replied, walking past her to find an empty desk. He moved with a casual grace that shouldn't be possible in the high gravity. Unless the map on the datapad is wrong. In which case, your security protocols are terrible. He sat down, dropped his bag and crossed his legs, still wearing that pleasant, unbothered smile. The air in the room shifted. It wasn't just hostility anymore, it was curiosity mixed with a dangerous agitation. From the back of the room, a heavy, grinding voice spoke up. He's mocking us. It was Gorak, a massive rock-skinned behemoth of a female. She stood up, her shadow swallowing Caleb's desk. He thinks because he has a uniform he is one of us. I say we test that theory. I say we see what color a human bleeds. Caleb didn't look back. He simply tapped his datapad, bringing up the course syllabus. Red, he said softly, almost to himself. Iron-based hemoglobin. Efficient for oxygen transport, terrible for carpet stains. Gorak roared and lunged, her fist, the size of a wrecking ball, coming down toward Caleb's skull. It was a blow meant to crush him instantly. The other students watched, waiting for the sickening crunch. But the crunch never came. The fist stopped inches from Caleb's face. Not because Gorak had shown mercy and not because Caleb had caught it, that would have been biologically impossible. The fist had stopped because a high-pitched, piercing whistle cut through the air, instantly locking Gorak's muscle armor in a paralysis field. Standing in the doorway was Instructor Halloway, a cyborg veteran whose lower jaw was entirely metal. He lowered the neural whip he had just fired. Sit down, Gorak, Halloway rasped, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. If you want to kill the new transfer, do it in the simulation ring. I don't want paperwork on my first day. Gorak snarled, the paralysis fading, and glared at Caleb. You got lucky, soft skin. The ring. Tomorrow. 0600 hours. Caleb finally turned to look at her. The smile was still there, fixed and unmoving like it was painted on porcelain. It's a date, he said. The rest of the day was a blur of tactical lectures and physical conditioning. Caleb struggled physically. There was no hiding that. During the endurance run, he lagged behind, his human lungs burning in the oxygen-rich atmosphere. During the strength training he could barely lift the warm-up weights for the Drakari. The girls of Omega-9 watched him with sneering contempt. To them strength was kinetic. It was how hard you could hit, how fast you could run. They saw his struggle as proof of his inferiority. But they missed what he was actually doing. While they were lifting weights, Caleb was watching them. He watched how Gorak favored her left leg, a subtle limp from an old injury. He watched how Zalara flinched whenever the overhead lights buzzed, suggesting a hypersensitivity to certain frequencies. He watched the social hierarchy, who looked at whom for approval, who ate alone, who was afraid. He was gathering data. That night, in the barracks, the isolation was palpable. The alien students slept in communal pods, bonding through shared pheromones and psychic links. Caleb was given a storage closet converted into a bunk. He lay there in the dark, staring at the metal ceiling. Slowly the smile dropped. His face went slack, drained of all color. His hands started to tremble, a violent, uncontrollable shaking. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small, battered locket. He didn't open it. He just held it so tight his knuckles turned white. The smile wasn't arrogance. It was armor. It was a frantic, desperate attempt to keep the screaming in his head from leaking out. If he stopped smiling he might start screaming, and if he started screaming he would never stop. The next morning the simulation ring was packed. Word had spread that the human pet was going to be executed by Gorak. Students from other units crowded the observation decks. Caleb stood in the center of the sand-covered arena. He wore standard sparring gear which looked like toys compared to Gorak's natural rockplate armor. Gorak stepped into the ring, raising her arms to the cheering crowd. I will break every bone in your body, she bellowed, and then I will use your spine as a toothpick. The buzzer sounded. Gorak charged. She was fast for her size, a freight train of living stone. The ground shook with every step. Caleb didn't move. He stood with his hands at his sides, that infuriating smile plastered on his face. 10 feet away. 5 feet. Just as Gorak pulled back her arm for the killing blow, Caleb spoke. He didn't shout. He whispered, but he pitched his voice perfectly to cut through the ambient noise, directly at Gorak. If you strike me, Caleb said, High Warlord Vrak will find out about the credit skimming operation in Sector 4. Gorak froze. She stumbled, her momentum carrying her forward, but the aggression evaporated instantly. Her fist hung in the air, trembling. Her eyes went wide, the pupils dilating in sheer terror. The crowd went silent. They couldn't hear what he said. They only saw the biggest bully in the academy stop dead in her tracks. What did you say? Gorak hissed, her voice trembling. Caleb took a casual step forward, invading her personal space. He looked up at her, still smiling. You've been funneling academy supplies to the black market to pay off your father's gambling debts. It's clumsy, Gorak. Your digital footprint is a mess. I found it in 10 minutes last night. Gorak was hyperventilating now. In the militaristic society of her people, theft and dishonor were punishable by execution. Not just for her but for her entire clan. You're a demon? She whispered. No, Caleb said brightly, patting her massive stone arm. I'm just the tactical analyst. Now, I believe the proper protocol here is for you to yield. Gorak looked at the crowd, then back at the small, smiling human who held her life in his hands. She dropped to one knee, bowing her head. I yield, she boomed, her voice cracking. The arena erupted in confusion. Boos and shouts rang out. Up in the VIP box, the Academy's headmaster, a shadowy figure named Director Kane, leaned forward, his interest piqued. Back in the locker room, the atmosphere had shifted. The contempt was gone, replaced by fear. Caleb sat on the bench, unlacing his boots. Zalara approached him. She wasn't smiling. Her spines were fully retracted, a sign of caution. You didn't defeat her, Zalara said softly. You didn't even touch her. That's not combat. That's cowardice. Caleb looked up. Combat is the application of force to achieve a political or strategic goal. I achieved my goal with zero energy expenditure. That's not cowardice, Zalara. That's efficiency. You threatened her, Zalara accused. I leveraged information, Caleb corrected. In my history we learned that the pen is mightier than the sword. But in this galaxy, the secret is mightier than the starship. He stood up and leaned in close to the deadly alien. I know about you too, Zalara. I know why you wake up screaming. I know why you flinch at the buzzing lights. And I know you're not angry at me. You're terrified that I can see the cracks in your armor. Zalara stepped back, hissed, and stormed off. But as she left, Caleb's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He touched his chest, where the locket lay hidden under his uniform. He was winning the battles, but the war was happening inside his own head. And he was running out of ammunition. 3 months passed. Omega 9 was no longer a chaotic collection of bullies. It was becoming a unit, and strangely, the glue holding them together was the human they couldn't figure out. Caleb had become the fixer. He helped Gorak hide her tracks in exchange for protection. He helped the Vex warriors optimize their drone formations, and he tutored the Krogans in advanced calculus. But the smile never left. It was becoming uncanny. Some of the girls started to call him the Mask. The turning point came during Deep Dive Week, a mandatory psychological simulation designed to test a soldier's resistance to psychic torture. The students were placed in pods, their minds linked to a central computer that manifested their worst fears. One by one, the aliens entered and exited, shaking, crying, or roaring in anger. Then it was Caleb's turn. Dr. Eris, the Academy's chief of psychology, monitored the screens. He was a thin, pale man with glasses that reflected the scrolling code. He had specific orders from Director Kane to break the human. They needed to know what made him tick. Caleb entered the pod. The lid sealed shut. On the observation screen, the simulation booted up. Usually the screen showed monsters, fire, failure. But for Caleb, the screen showed a sunny day. A colony made of white glass and solar panels. Children playing in a park. It was beautiful. What is this? Zalara asked, watching from the observation deck. Where are the monsters? This is Colony 4. Caleb's voice came through the speakers, calm and detached. My home. Then the sky turned black. Not from night, but from ships. Thousands of them. The bombardment didn't make a sound in the simulation, but the destruction was absolute. The white glass shattered. The solar panels burned. The children disappeared in flashes of plasma. The students of Omega 9 watched in horror. They were soldiers, yes, but this wasn't war. This was erasure. In the simulation, a young Caleb, no older than 10, stood amidst the burning ruins. He wasn't running. He was standing over a pile of rubble, holding a broken toy. And he was smiling. A gruesome, terrified, broken smile. He was smiling so he wouldn't cry because the soldiers patrolling the ruins killed anything that made a sound. Silence is survival, the young Caleb whispered in the simulation. Suddenly, the simulation shifted. The scene dissolved into a white room, a military laboratory. A figure in a general's uniform stood over the boy. It was Director Kane. The subject shows resilience, the digital Kane said. Wipe the memory. Reprocess him. We can use this trauma. We can weaponize it. In the observation room, Dr. Aris slammed his hand on the console. Cut the feed. Cut it now. The screens went black. The pod hissed open. Caleb sat up. He was drenched in sweat, gasping for air. He wasn't smiling. For the first time in 3 months, the mask was gone, revealing a face etched with a sorrow so deep it looked ancient. Zalara was the first one to the pod. She looked at the human, really looked at him, and realized the truth. You remember? She whispered. They tried to wipe your mind, but you remember. Caleb looked at her, his eyes red. I remember everything, Zalara. I remember Colony 4. I remember who gave the order. And I know what they're doing to you. He grabbed her wrist. Why do you think you don't remember your childhood, Zalara? Why does Gorak have gaps in her memory? Why do the Vex dream of static? The realization hit Zalara like a physical blow. The Academy wasn't training them. It was programming them. Director Kane was using memory modification to erase their consciences, turning them into biological machines loyal only to him. They stole our past, Caleb said, his voice hardening, the smile slowly, painfully creeping back onto his face, but this time it wasn't a mask. It was a blade. So, I'm going to steal their future. The revelation in the medical bay changed everything. Omega-9 went silent. No more infighting. No more bullying. They moved with a new, terrifying synchronicity. Caleb had given them something more dangerous than weapons training. He had given them a common enemy. Director Kane, sensing the shift in the unit's loyalty, decided to accelerate the timeline. He ordered a live-fire final exam. The arena was set. Omega-9 was placed in the center. Surrounding them were 3 battalions of the Academy's elite drone guards, mindless robotic soldiers programmed for lethality. And overseeing it all from the high command platform was Director Kane himself, flanked by his generals. The loudspeaker boomed. Cadet Thorne, Kane's voice echoed. You have corrupted this unit with your weakness. This exam is simple. Unit Omega-9 must survive for 10 minutes. If you die, you fail. If you surrender, you are expelled. The drone army activated, thousands of red eyes glowing in the dust. Gorak cracked her knuckles. There are too many of them. We can't win a firefight, Zalara hissed, her spines extending. We don't need to, Caleb said. He walked to the front of the formation, completely unarmed. He tapped his comms link. I need an amplifier. Zalara, link your psionic frequency to my mic. What are you doing? She asked. I'm smiling, Caleb said. He looked up at the command platform directly at Kane. Then he broadcasted. Not a weapon but a file. During his months as the Fixer, Caleb hadn't just been helping classmates, he had been hacking. He had used the Academy's own surveillance drones to record everything. The illegal memory wipes, the off-book weapon deals, the deliberate massacre of Colony 4 to test a new plasma weapon. Attention Galactic Council, Caleb's voice rang out, amplified across the entire planet and bounced to the relay satellites in orbit. You think you're watching a graduation exam. You're actually watching a crime scene. Huge holographic screens above the arena flickered to life. But instead of the battle, they showed the footage. They showed Kane ordering the bombing of the colony. They showed Dr. Aris wiping the memories of Zalara's sister. They showed the truth. On the platform, Kane went pale. Cut the feed. Destroy them. All of them. The drone guards raised their rifles. The firing squad was ready. Omega-9. Caleb shouted, turning to his class. Do not engage. Trust me. It was insane. Thousands of guns were pointed at them. Every instinct screamed to fight. But they looked at the small human boy who had smiled in the face of death every single day. The drones fired. But the shots never landed. A massive, shimmering energy shield erupted around Omega-9. It wasn't technology. It was Zalara. She was screaming, her hands raised, channeling a level of psionic power that shouldn't have been possible. I remember, she screamed. The memory of her family, unlocked by Caleb's revelation, fueled her power. It wasn't rage, it was love. A protective fury that shattered the limiters Kane had put in her mind. Gorak roared, slamming the ground, and the earth swallowed the first wave of drones. The Vex took to the air, dismantling the robots with surgical precision. It wasn't a battle, it was a dismantling. The students weren't fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like free people. Caleb stood in the center of the chaos, untouched. He watched the command platform. Kane was trying to flee, but his own guards, realizing the magnitude of the exposure, had turned their weapons on him. The firing stopped. The dust settled. Caleb walked through the wreckage of the drones toward the camera drone hovering near the ground. He looked into the lens, addressing the trillions of beings watching across the galaxy. My name is Caleb Thorne. I am a survivor of Colony 4. And I am the first human graduate of Omega 9. He wiped blood from his cheek. You tried to teach us that power comes from forgetting. From obedience. He looked back at Zalara, Gorak, and the others who stood tall and proud. You were wrong. Power comes from remembering who you are. And we will never forget again. And then, for the whole galaxy to see, he gave one final smile. But this one wasn't a mask. It was a victory flag. The fallout was swift. The Galactic Council, faced with irrefutable evidence and a PR nightmare, arrested Director Kane within the hour. The Academy Reformation Act was passed a week later, banning memory modification and opening the school to all species, regardless of military standing. Omega 9 became legends. They were dubbed the Valkyries, the Guardians of the New Era. A month later, on the landing pad where it all began, the unit gathered to say goodbye. The gray skies of Ironhold had cleared, revealing a stunning, starlit nebula. Caleb stood by the shuttle, his duffel bag over his shoulder. He wasn't wearing a uniform anymore. He wore civilian clothes, a simple jacket and jeans. Zalara stepped forward. She towered over him, but her posture was soft. You don't have to go, Caleb. You could lead us. You could be a warlord. Caleb chuckled. I think the galaxy has enough warlords, Zalara. It needs a few more diplomats now. Besides, I have a colony to rebuild. Gorak sniffed loudly, wiping a massive tear from her stony cheek. You are still too small. You will get eaten out there. I'll manage, Caleb said. I've got a secret weapon. The smile, Zalara said. Caleb nodded. The smile. He looked at them one last time. The monsters who became sisters. The killers who became saviors. Why did you do it? Zalara asked suddenly. Why did you smile that first day? You were terrified. I could smell it. Caleb looked up at the stars. My father used to tell me that fear is a darkness. If you let it in, you can't see the way forward. A smile. A smile is like lighting a candle. It doesn't make the darkness go away, but it gives you just enough light to take the next step. And sometimes one step is all you need. He boarded the shuttle. As the engines flared to life, lifting him away from the fortress of steel and sorrow, Caleb watched the shrinking figures of Omega 9. He touched the locket in his pocket. He didn't need to open it anymore. He knew what was inside. A picture of his family smiling. And as the shuttle broke the atmosphere, entering the infinite silence of space, Caleb Thorne didn't smile. He laughed. A pure, unburdened laugh that echoed into the stars. And that is the story of how a smile brought down an empire. If you felt that victory, if you cheered for Caleb and the Valkyries, please destroy that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that even the smallest light can conquer the dark. Make sure you're subscribed and have that bell turned on so you don't miss our next adventure. If you want more tales of humans defying the odds, check out the playlist right here on the screen. Now, I have a question for you. If you were the only human in an alien academy, what would your secret weapon be? Intelligence? Strength? Or something else entirely? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Stay curious, stay brave, and keep smiling. I'll see you in the next story.